Hello, my bookworm friends. Kim here, and welcome on back to Bookworm Buzz. Welcome on back to my channel, you guys. And for those of you who are new or who are checking out this video and this channel for the first time, a huge big welcome. In today's video, I'm happy to say I am going to be doing my monthly wrap-up for the month of March 2025. I had in general a pretty good reading month. Well, I should say that in terms of number of books that I finished, because I actually managed to finish eight books this month. And I am very close to finishing my ninth. So my ninth will probably be finished right at the beginning of April. So I feel like I had a good reading month in terms of volume of books. I did not have the best month in terms of rating, but, and this is a big but, I did have one 5-star read, you guys. And so I can't wait to tell you about that book. But again, another but, I also had a 1-star read. And I must tell you, for me, that is immensely unusual because I cannot remember the last time that I rated a book with only 1 star. Because normally, if I am really not enjoying a book and I can see that it is not my thing and it's likely to be a 1-star read, I tend to DNF the book. So the fact that I actually finished this book and gave it 1 star is very unusual for me. So anyway, on that basis, I have lots to share with you guys today. So without further ado, my friends, let's kick things off. So I am obviously going to start with the 1-star read for this month. I am going to count these books down from 8th position to 1st position. So in 8th position this month, and the book that I awarded 1 star to is this one. This is Black Sheep by Rachel Harrison. It is my first book by this author, and unfortunately, I think it is going to be my first and my last. I did not enjoy this book at all, you guys. I was not the right reader for this. It is a horror novel, and I was excited to get to it. And I'm okay with horrors. It's not a genre that I read a lot of, but I do read some horrors now and then. And I just did not like this one. It did not work for me. This is basically the story of a cult, actually. It's a young girl who manages to leave this cult. She's getting on with her life, and then out of the blue, she gets an invitation to a close family member's wedding. If I remember correctly, I think the bride-to-be was her cousin, but they grew up together and they were almost as sisters. And so this girl decides to go back to her hometown and back to her family to attend this wedding. And of course, everything goes pear-shaped from there. Now, where the horror aspect comes in is with the fact that this cult is actually a satanic cult. Now, I went into this read not knowing about that. I just thought this was a cult story that was going to go a little bit dark and obviously lean on the horror side of things. And as you guys know, I can do dark. I have no problem with dark. So I was actually excited about this. But unfortunately, this story just didn't work for me. I found some of it very uncomfortable, I must be honest. I'm not a specifically religious person, but as children, my sister and I were brought up in a Christian home. We went to Sunday school. When I was old enough, I attended church for a year or two until I reached an age where I worked out that none of that was for me. But having said that, because of my upbringing, I found the whole satanic cult aspect of this book very difficult. There were lots of scenes when she goes back where there's a whole lot of Hail Satan going on and people worshipping Satan and making comments like Hail Satan all the time. And it was just uneasy for me. So maybe this was more of a me problem than a book problem, but I didn't enjoy it for that reason. And also, I just thought the plot was so thin. When I finished this book, other than the fact that I didn't like it and it made me feel uncomfortable, I just remember thinking to myself, what the hell was this story actually about? Like, the plot was very, very thin. The story got very ridiculous at times. And yeah, this one was not for me. So let me just leave it at that. This was my 1-star read. Then moving on to 7th position for this month. And I'm so upset that I didn't love this book because I really thought I was going to. I ended up awarding this one 2 stars, you guys. This is The Return of Ellie Black by Emiko Jean. Now, I was so excited for this one. When I read the blurb and I heard all the raving that was going on about this book, I really thought I was going to love this story. So basically, this story is about a girl that, well, I shouldn't say a girl, she was a child that went missing, and then she reappears. She comes back, and things are not quite as they seem. She's very different to how she was. Her mom is trying her best with her, but obviously Ellie is very withdrawn. She's acting very strangely. And yeah, the story goes from there. So I really thought that this was going to be a great thriller. We were going to go into all sorts of dark territory around Ellie's background and why she was missing. And the book does go down that route, don't get me wrong. You do go into where Ellie was, why she was missing, and what was going on. But that still part of the story didn't grab me. It went in a direction that I didn't really expect and that I didn't love. And I just found myself bored, to be honest. I loved the first half of the story. It was setting things up well, and I was very invested in the beginning, and I thought things were going well. And then we hit the second part of the story, and I just started to lose interest. I just wasn't interested in the plot. I wasn't interested in where Ellie had been. I wasn't interested in what had been going on. So overall, I'm afraid it just didn't work for me. And I think that was for various reasons. I mean, firstly, the plot, like I've already said, the second half of the book, I just lost interest and I got a bit bored. And I think that came from the fact that I didn't bond with these characters because there was very minimal character development. And then thirdly, the other major issue that I had was this writing style was not for me. I found it to be very choppy, very blunt. It just didn't flow well. And so, yeah, guys, for all of those reasons, and without banging on further about this one, unfortunately, this one comes in 7th position for March, and it scored a 2 stars from me. Then in 6th position in the month of March, and unfortunately another 2-star rating from me. And again, I'm just so upset that I didn't love this one because I was so looking forward to it, and it had all the makings of a great thriller. I mean, this book has, I must tell you, an absolutely fantastic opening chapter. I read that opening chapter and I was absolutely hooked and engaged. So basically what you have in this story is a woman is chilling out at home. She's lying in the bath. And then the next thing, the hatch, the ceiling hatch down the passage opens. A guy jumps down, and 30 seconds later, this lady is dead. So, I mean, just tell me that that isn't just so gripping. But anyway, the story goes on from there. Basically, one of her very good friends is living down the road and is watching a video. I can't remember if her daughter found this video on TikTok or what the story was, but she's watching this video and it's filmed. And lo and behold, a masked man is jumping into a house, you know, down into a house from the ceiling. And she's watching this video and she suddenly realizes that the video has been filmed in her own house. So I mean, as far as thrillers go, does that not just sound absolutely amazing and totally thrilling? Yes, it does. But this book was anything thrilling for me personally. Again, like the previous book, I found the second half of the story just to be so boring. And by the end of the story, there were just so many characters and so many different names, and I hadn't bonded with any of the characters. I got to a stage where I had to reread things and think, now, who are they talking about now, and why is this relevant, and what's going on? And yes, the story also did have quite a few plot holes, I thought. I mean, there were things that were going on, and I was like, like, why didn't you just do A, B, and C? You know, so I just found there were a few plot holes in here that I didn't really enjoy. The daughter in the story, who I think readers are supposed to like and bond with, I really didn't like. I mean, I thought she needed a little bit of discipline in her life. And yeah, there were also quite a few red herrings. Now, I don't normally mind that in thriller novels, provided it's well done. But I just thought, yeah, sometimes some of the red herrings were just very irrelevant and yeah, I couldn't really see the point and so on. So again, my friends, unfortunately, another thriller book that I thought was going to be a cracker and that ended up being less than average for me. And then next up in this video, and the book that comes in 5th position, is this one over here, which I had previously featured in one of my videos because I was looking very forward to reading this one. This one is Victorian Psycho, and it's by Virginia Fato. Now, this one I didn't actually read with my eyeballs. I listened to this one as an audiobook, and I'm happy to say that I awarded this one 3 stars. This one is pipped as being historical fiction slash thriller slash horror. So it falls into all sort of different genres. I enjoyed this book without absolutely loving it. So the fact that I awarded it 3 stars does mean that I enjoyed it. It does mean that I can see potentially that other people would enjoy the story. But obviously 3 stars means I didn't completely love it. So this book is a very difficult one to explain. It's a fairly short book. It came in at just over 200 pages, which I must also tell you is not my absolute favorite thing because I don't read novellas and I don't read short stories, and there's a reason I don't. And I think some of the issues that I had with this story probably are around the fact that I actually found this story to be a little bit too short. Now, you will often hear YouTube reviewers talking about books being too long and that 200 pages could have been cut out, but you don't very often hear people talking about a novel being too short. This one for me was probably too short because it lacked character development. It felt rushed. The ending felt rushed. I wasn't able to really bond with the characters because there was not a lot of build up and a lot of character development because there just simply weren't enough pages. So in the story, basically what you have is you have a governess coming to work for this wealthy family and to look after their 2 children. But the story is obviously bigger than that. There's stuff going on in the background. There is a reason that she has come to work for these people. And let's just say that there's a little bit of a revenge aspect in the story. Now, I must tell you, in general, I did enjoy this one somewhat. There were redeeming features of this. It was very different. It was very off the wall. I can also tell you that it was fairly violent. There were scenes upon scenes upon scenes of quite graphic violence that goes on specifically in the second half of this book. So if you are not okay with violence or it's sort of a trigger point for you, then I wouldn't recommend this book for you. Also, I did sometimes feel like, was all of that necessary? Some of the scenes, I didn't know, they almost came across as if they had been included for shock value more than actually taking the story somewhere. But by the time I finished the book, I could appreciate it. I could see why they were in the story, and I did enjoy this one. So not going to be an all-time favorite of mine, but one that was a fairly good read in the month. Then, my friends, let's move on to talk about Nightwatching by Tracy Sierra. Now, this is a thriller novel and it comes in 4th place in today's video, and I awarded this one 3 stars. This is another story that I was very excited about, but I ended up only being lukewarm about. I did enjoy it. I was somewhat entertained. And so hence the 3-star rating. But again, not a book that is an all-time favorite for me, but one that I enjoyed nonetheless, and I'm sure those of you who enjoy thrillers will probably enjoy this one as well. So basically, in the story, there is a woman who is home alone with her 2 children. She tucks her son into bed and she goes to bed herself. But it's not long before she hears a noise in her house, and an intruder is in fact in her house. She wakes up her children and she manages to go into a very old part of the house and to hide with them in a certain section of the house. And then the story becomes about her fear, her anxiety, trying to decide what she should do. Should she just remain quiet? Should she escape? Should she run for help? What should she do? So again, another one that sounded very appealing, that I was very excited to read and that I did generally enjoy. But some of the issues I had with the story were around the pacing, because there were times when I felt very invested and very involved and the thriller was going at a good pace. And then there were other times where I found the story was starting to get a little bit boring. There were also scenes in this book where the mother, this is much later in the book, is interacting with police officers, and I just found those very repetitive. It was page after page of the same questions and the same answers, and I found that part of the story to be a bit repetitive. And then lastly, there were also flashback chapters that I actually didn't mind, and they were quite interesting, but by the time I got to the end of this read, I just realized that they actually were pointless and they didn't really add anything much to the story. I think also, in fairness to this book, I think one of the problems for me was that it ended up going in a direction that I didn't expect and that I didn't love, just because in my own mind, when I was reading this one, I thought, oh my gosh, I can see where the story is going. That is going to work so well. I'm going to love that direction if it goes there, and it really goes there, because the direction I was thinking the story was going to go would mean that it would go very psychological. And I am a massive fan of psychological thrillers. So in my mind, I had this whole story worked out. I knew where it was going to go, and I was just looking so forward to seeing how the author was going to do it and what was going to be the end result. And then the story did not go that way at all. It went in a completely different direction from what I was expecting. So that is a totally me problem and not a book or an author problem. But I think it was probably also one of the reasons why I didn't love this one. Just because in my own mind, I was like, oh no, if it had just gone in the direction of the psychological aspects that I was expecting, this could have been great. But because it didn't, it fell a little bit flat for me. But I think if it sounds interesting to you, you should probably give this one a chance. Like many of the other books that have featured in this video, there are a lot of rave reviews about some of these thrillers. I'm just obviously telling you why they didn't work 100% for me. But having said that, this was still a 3-star read, which means that I did enjoy it. I was entertained by it, and I do recommend it to others if the story sounds like it's something that you would enjoy. And then Bookworms, moving into my 4- and 5-star reads, which means these last 3 books are books that I absolutely loved. I thought they were fantastic. So in 3rd place in this video is this book over here called All Good People Here by Ashley Flowers. Now, this one, my friends, is also a thriller, but I would also say it's a little bit of a crime novel as well. So basically in this story, you have a journalist who goes back to her hometown to investigate the story of a missing child, a missing girl. A girl goes missing. This journalist comes back to investigate this because this latest child, well, it appears to be a child abduction until further evidence is obtained, but this missing child basically resembles a case from when this journalist was a child as well. One of her best friends also went missing in this town when they were children. So she feels like she has a personal interest in the story, and she comes back to investigate. Now, for those of you who are true crime junkies, which I am as well, I was reading the story, and as the story was going along, I kept thinking to myself, man alive, this sounds very much like the case of JonBenet Ramsey. So those of you who are familiar, like I've said, with true crime will probably know about that case. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, it is a real-life true case of a child beauty queen. She was about 6, I think, when apparently or allegedly an assailant entered their house and murdered this little girl. This was over 20 years ago, and to this day, this case has never been solved. I have watched multiple documentaries on that JonBenet Ramsey case, and I can tell you that the author definitely, without a doubt, took inspiration from that case for this book and this story. This story is obviously a fiction story, but you will see when you read this fiction story that there are a lot of similarities between this fiction story and the real-life true crime of JonBenet Ramsey's murder. But anyway, that is just an aside. I thought this was a great thriller, a great crime type novel. I really enjoyed this one. I actually enjoyed the fact that I was making a link between the crime in this book and the real life crime that I've just described to you guys. So that actually added to the story for me. It didn't detract from it. But I can also say that the murder mystery element of the story does get a little bit, not a lot, it gets a little bit complicated, and you do need to concentrate just a smidgen more than perhaps with some other easy reading novels. But to be honest, I never felt lost. I always felt like I knew what was going on. And the other things that I loved about the story is that it had dual timelines, which is always something that I love. And the story was told from multiple points of views, which is also something that I always love. So overall, I really enjoyed the story. I actually read this one on my Kindle while also listening to it at the same time as an audiobook. And I thought the audiobook was really good. So yes, my friends, this one is a thriller / crime novel that I definitely recommend. I gave it 4 stars. It was very entertaining, very fun, and like I say, the link to the real life John Bonet crime story was also interesting for me. So yeah, I'm happy to say this one ends in 3rd position for the month. And then in 2nd position for the month is a book that comes from an author that needs absolutely no introduction. If you are a thriller reader, you would have read books by this author, and it's none other than Riley Sager. So this is Middle of the Night. This came out, I think it was towards the end of 2024. I don't think this is a 2025 release. Let me just check. No, definitely 2024. So this came out towards the end of 2024. To very mixed reviews, I must say. I actually went into this novel I went into it with fairly low expectations, just because I had seen reviews by some die-hard Riley Sager fans who really didn't enjoy this book. So my expectations were low, and that probably helped because I ended up loving this one. This was a 4-star read for me, you guys. I have read some Riley Sagers that I've loved, and then I've read some others that I really genuinely haven't loved. So I'm very happy to say that this is a story from Riley Sager that worked for me and that I did love. So in short, this is the story about a man who has to grapple with and deal with the fact that when they were children, his best friend went missing. This guy and his best friend were camping in a tent in the garden, and when this guy woke up, this is obviously when they were children, he woke up and his best friend was missing. There was a slash in the tent and the best friend had gone missing and had been abducted. So basically the story is around that. Once again, it's told from multiple points of views, and there are dual timelines because obviously there are chapters where we look back into the past, into what was going on with these kids, and the whole story is obviously told from that perspective, from the perspective of what is happening to this man now as an adult, and setting the scene and showing you what happened back in the day when they were children and they were innocently camping in the garden. Now, as with many Riley Sager books, this one did have a slight supernatural element to it, which I love. And I thought it was done so well in this story. Like I've already said, those of you familiar with Riley Sager will know that he often does that in his books. And he manages to tie in these supernatural elements so well, I think, to the story. And I feel, again, that that was done well in this book. A slight criticism was now and then it was a little bit slower maybe than I would have liked. So maybe now and then a few pacing issues. But in general, I really liked the main character. I liked him as an adult. I liked him as a child. I was very invested in the story of their childhood and what was going on there and between all those friends. And obviously to find out what happened with this abduction and why his best friend was abducted, went missing, and was never found. So all in all, guys, I am very happy to say that I love this story. This is one of my favorite Riley Sager novels. So if you are someone who has avoided this book because you have heard negative things or because some genuine Sager fans have not been jumping up and down about this one, I still recommend that you give it a chance because you may just be like me and you may just find that you actually really enjoy it. So I'm happy to say in 2nd position for the month, Middle of the Night. And then, my friends, we have gotten to my favorite read of the month. This book comes in 1st position for the month of March. And can you guys believe it is a horror novel? So yes, I had a horror novel in this video in 8th position, and then I have a horror novel in 1st position. I loved this book. It was so unexpected. I didn't expect to love it as much as I did, but it was a 5-star read for me, my friends, and that is Incidents Around the House by Josh Malerman. Now, some of you may recognize the author's name. He is the same author of a book called Bird Box, which was also made into, was it a Netflix show? Anyway, it was made into a TV show, and he became very well known because of Bird Box. Guys, this story, I'm going to tell you, scared the daylights out of me. Many other people have described it as being a little bit eerie, a little bit creepy. No, for me, it went further than that. Yes, it was eerie. Yes, it was creepy, but it was also downright scary. Because what you have in this story is a child, an 8-year-old child who, I must tell you, her and her family are basically haunted by an entity that she calls Other Mommy. This is because this entity comes and visits this little girl. What was her name? I think her name was Bella. And this entity comes and visits this little girl and interacts with her, and Bella nicknames her Other Mommy. Now already, how frightening and terrifying does that sound? I am someone who is really, really scared and frightened when books go down paranormal routes, hauntings, possessions, evil spirits, any of that type of stuff scares the living daylights out of me. And this book did exactly that. I also took a decision, just to add to the fun factor of reading this book, that I was not going to read it in daylight hours. I was only going to read it at night, and I was going to read it when I got into bed at night. That is because I wanted to add to the whole horror experience. In the dark, in the bedroom, yes, obviously having my bedside light on, with a dark house, my husband asleep, and I wanted that experience. And I think it worked, because there were certain chapters in this book that literally put my hairs on end. I mean, the hairs on my arms would stand up. I found this one so immensely creepy, so immensely scary. But over and above that, it was also just so well written, and the plot moved along. I couldn't wait to see where things were going. And I must also tell you, this is another book where I listened to the audiobook at the same time. Guys, do yourselves a favor and get the audiobook. It was excellent, because you have little Bella and you have a real child's voice. So you're getting this dialogue from Bella that is done by, I'm sure the narrator was not an 8-year-old. I've actually heard that she was a teenager in her late teens, but the voice comes across as very young, even actually younger than what Bella is in the story. So you've got this very young, innocent child, and then you've got Other Mommy, and then you've got her real mommy and her dad, and so on. And I just thought that the narration was excellent. It added to the fear factor. It added to the creepiness. And I must also tell you the ending of this book. Oh gosh. It went in a way where once it ends, you almost have to reread the last chapter again, or the last few pages. And then it still leaves you with that sense of, hold on a second, what actually happened? And your mind gives you different opinions, different options, different endings, if you know what I mean. I mean, the ending is not totally bizarre. I mean, it's actually, in terms of a horror novel, the ending is actually not bizarre at all. It's just one of those endings where it can be interpreted in a few different ways. And I tend to love that. I tend to love endings like that. So, my friends, because of that, and for all of those reasons, this one is my #1 favorite read of the month. I'm so excited for that, because I don't read a lot of horror. And when I do read horror, it often sort of misses the mark for me, or I find sometimes the stories just go too stupid, too bizarre. And this one for me didn't. Like I say, maybe it just worked for me because I am interested in the paranormal. I do enjoy stories that go down that route. But for whatever reason, this one was a cracker. So if you guys have not picked this one up, if it sounds of interest to you, give it a go. You may be somebody that just ends up finding this one a little bit creepy and a little bit eerie, as some other people have. Or you may be somebody like me who ends up thinking, what the actual F? This was scary. So yeah, on that note, my friends, that pretty much wraps up today's video. Those are the 8 books that I managed to read in March. How was your reading month? What did you read? What were your favorites? Please let me know by commenting down below in the comments section. I always love to hear what people are reading and what ratings and reviews you have also given books. On that note, let me sign off and say happy reading, bookworms. Bye.